Hi guys, and welcome to another FACEHAMMER old world video. And this video is about the movement phase. A new article has dropped today on the 6th of November about the movement phase, which is the next phase they're covering on WARCOM. You can check the link to that. If you missed the strategy phase, then they've got an article there, but we've also got a video on that. You can go and check out my thoughts on that and what that might mean from my experience from playing Warhammer from all those years ago. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the article, see if there's any little tidbits or things, what it might mean for the game, and reflect on the editions I've played and if I feel that what that might mean for tactical play and things like that. So let's get into it. So without further ado, let's do it. So the article dropped today, and some interesting things. So as first of all, talks about formations of units. So you have basically close order, open order, skirmish, and lance. Now it says this is open order as well. So whether or not this, like, you kind of, you're ranked up your traditional kind of ranks and flanks, you're kind of thinking, okay, well, maybe that's open order. I don't know what that is. Maybe that's a special rule. Maybe that's because you haven't got very, very deep. Maybe you're wider. I don't know. But it seems like open order might make you a little bit more maneuverable. But skirmishers that my open order might just be what skirmishers are when they charge, basically, when they get into combat. So skirmish is we're used to seeing that, is that your models individually, kind of scattered inch apart. The lance formation, obviously, it used to be 3 wide and deep in 8th, but previously it was like this. Obviously, it doesn't look like there's a wedge formation for bows in Bretonnians, probably because the kit comes with those barricades, but yeah, it would have been good to see that come back. Remember that back in the day. So it talks about combat order, and that's saying that you're wider than you are deep. So your ranks, you've got more models in your rank than you do in your file. You know, quite simple. That's what we're used to seeing generally. Then it does say marching column. So it says you have more models per file than its rank, and it's in marching column. That's a new thing. Obviously, we'll get into it later in the article, but marching is W move. It used to be W move. Marching column looks like it says you can triple your move. Now, whether or not, it does say though that you don't gain your ranks in close combat, so it might be quite dangerous to march out, and then if you get charged, then that could be a problem. So the movement phase generally is the most important phase in Warhammer. It's where you control the space on the table. It's when you get your combats set up in your favor. It's when you bait and switch people with fleas and redirects. It's generally the phase where you win the game with combat armies. There are armies that don't care about that and they shot you and just avoided combat, but still, movement was important for avoiding combat, so still very important phase of the game. We've seen lots of iterations of charging in Warhammer over the years. We had the actual UW move, you measure, you can't pre-measure. So you can pre-measure, it says in here you can. You declare your targets. They talk about arcs, so you've got to have your front arc. It will be visible, so obviously you can't charge around corners. So some things we're used to there, that's kind of standard from old school Warhammer. It talks about charge reactions. It says hold, stand and shoot, flee, and counter charge. Now, stand and shoot, it says if you're within the unit that's charging move characteristic, you can't stand and shoot, which is quite big if you're close. I don't remember that being a thing. But it might have been. I don't really play shooting armies, so it never really came up for me. It did say as well that counter charge might be interesting. It says alert units. So whether or not this is tied into your initiative characteristic, which might be quite interesting, or, you know, because if initiative was never really a very important stat, it was kind of like, do you fall down holes, or, you know, who strikes first? But the problem is that generally charges struck first, so, and then after he got charged, you generally got mullered if you weren't in protracted combat. So it did make a difference for elf on elf action when you had always strike first and it went down to initiative order and things like that, but it just wasn't that an important stat. So if there's something to do with, if you're higher initiative, you can charge counter charge, or you can make their charge less effective. I don't know what that means, but we'll see. I'm sure we'll get some more details later. It says to move your charges. Now, it says you roll 2 dice and you pick the highest score and add your move to it. So the skeletons charge between 5 and 10. There must be movement 4, that used to be. So 2d6, pick your highest, add 4, that's your movement. Now, Bretonian Knights, it says, are dangerous. They got Swift Stride, which generally was things like cavalry and things like that. Called it, and it says that they had an extra d6. Now, I don't know whether that's, you roll 3d6, pick the highest two, or you do the normal charge, then add an extra dice. I don't know. And it does say that if you're in range, it says account for wheeling. So a wheel is when you pivot around a corner. And one of the most important things about that is that you have to measure the outside distance of that arc that you pivot. And there's a diagram, which I'll show in a sec. So one of the things about this is it says that you have to account for wheeling. So what I liked in 8th edition is you measured the distance between the two targets, and that was the distance. And it was the closest point. It's a 10. That's what I need to roll. So I need to roll a 6 plus 4 is 10. This means that you will have to kind of move the unit and see if it reaches. And if you have to wheel or move over difficult terrain, this comes a really difficult thing to work out, because you have to take the movement penalty all the time you're on terrain and things like that. So hopefully they've tidied that up, because otherwise that's going to be a bit of a pain in the ass playing the game and trying to, because charging is so important and it's so impactful. Failing a charge, making a charge could be winning and losing. Having to do some sort of movement measuring thing is going to be a bit of a pain in the ass, because most people, from my experience, never measured their wheels correctly. And I'll show you that in a minute. Anyway, hopefully not, but that'll be a bit of a downer for me if that's the case. It does say that if you don't get there, you still move the full distance you've rolled. Now, I don't know if that means just the d6 or that means like the whole thing added together, which actually could be pretty dangerous, because in 8th edition, if you failed a charge, you generally didn't go that far forward. I think you went like d6 forward, or the d or half, or your movement, or whatever the highest d6 was on the rolls. If you rolled 3d6, add your move. If you roll a 5, then you move 5 inches. Generally, you're not that bothered. If you move like 15 inches and stop an inch short, that's going to be a bit of a problem, because one, especially if you've got a wheel to maximize, you've probably exposed a flank or an angle you didn't want to. Again, this is at the start of the movement phase, so what's nice about this, if you play an army like, I don't know, like High Elves, and you've got Silver Helms, they fail their charge. If you've got like an eagle, maybe it can fly across and plug the gap, and to protect the flank. And maybe that's another use for units like that, or a skirmishing unit could, or a fast cavalry unit could swip in. So it's important to see how that works. This is about compulsory moves. This is like fleeing units, rallying, random moves. That's like things like fanatics or failing your stupidity test. Then you do your normal moves. It says the mechanics of movement. So you can move or march. So obviously move is just you move. And then marching is you go double pace, but you can't do anything other than wheel. So it talks about wheeling here. Now, wheeling is done around a pivot point. So this is a pivot point. You can see my mouse cursor. So there. So this pivot point here, you hold that still and you measure the distance here, and the unit pivots. And this corner doesn't move. Now, there's so many people that I used to play when they wheeled. They would get their unit. Let's just take this for an example. Okay. And they would wheel, and rather than hold this and wheel like this, they would go, I want to wheel like that. And what's happened is this back corner has moved sideways, because they want to go this way or this way. So they want to go this way. And so rather than wheel move, they slide, and actually they get a better angle. They can turn quicker. They can move further forward and get the angle they want. That's not how it works. So having to do this in a part of a charge, you always could wheel in a charge, but because the distance didn't matter, it just mattered about the mechanic of it, of the swing round. Now, if you've got to measure that, I'm not a big fan of that. But anyway, so in here you can see a wheel being executed. So if this was a normal move, if this could have been a charge as well, I think you only wheel once in a charge, but you would wheel here, measure this, then you'd measure this, then you'd measure this, then you'd measure the distance up to here, then you'd measure distance there. So it's 1, 2, 3, then over this side, 4, You know, it's quite a lot of measuring. And I think, you know, you've got to measure like here, here, and it's fine, but you just got to make sure you do it accurately. And so the best thing that I found when I played people, if it was like important, I'd say I'll help you by holding the corners like so you can't move it, and that means the wheel's done correctly. So yeah, it's one of those things. But anyway, so you can wheel like that, and then it says it pivots through its leading edge. You can't wheel backwards. I don't know if you can in the new game, but you never could. I don't think you can. It says you can turn, and that's your unit models move 90 or 180 degrees, quarter of your movement for each 90 degrees. Now, normally a turn, you don't have any choice on the angle. So if my unit's here and I turn it, I don't do that. I don't know if this is the case in the new game, but this is how it used to work. You would just turn the model, so this would become your front rank. So this was your front rank, now this is your front rank. Now this could be a different size to this, and in this game that means suddenly you're not even in combat or close combat formation, whatever they call it, and then that means now you have no rank bonus if you're facing this way. Now what's important is a turn doesn't allow you to do this. Oh, here, and I want to turn sideways, and I want to pivot, and I want to move. Because you can't, like, you go, I'm going to turn, you turn 90 degrees. You don't turn, and you don't pivot like this. It's a 90 degree. It's not an up to 90 degree. It's not a variable distance. You can move backwards and sideways. Again, your facing stays exactly as it is. So it's straight back, straight sideways. You can't pivot. Now, the way you used to be able to do it is to be doing a they've got two things here. They said redress the ranks or reform. I don't know what the difference is, but reform is where you can pivot on the spot, keep the center point the same, and you can change your formation. So you could go from a 10x2 to a 5x4, whatever, or you know, whatever, or a 10x1. Now what that used to do used to have some weirdness where you could go into a line 10x1 swiftly, and that used to have a musician could do this, pass a leadership test, and then you can wheel or do a half move afterwards, and you would wheel, and then you would swing the back of the unit round, which allowed you to do weird things like throw fanatics out. Then you could join a character into the unit, you know, and they go into the front rank, but then sometimes if the front rank's full, they go further up. Then suddenly you could gain a load, or you could do a thing like you could face this way, pivot, swing the background, join a character into the back of the unit, and then teleport 20 inches to the front rank, then do your stuff in the next hero phase, like cast and magic or whatever. So there is some shenanigans with movement. I don't know how much of that's going to be in the game. And that sort of stuff that the studio always wanted to stop and never really was able to do it with the rules. So I'm interested to see if there's some restrictions on things like swift reforming, moving. If you can't swift reform, that's going to make your movement so important to not get in the wrong position, and fast units are going to be a real pain. You're going to have to take things like fast cavalry, skirmishes, stuff like that, and undead might really suffer because they generally don't have access to a lot of that stuff. Be interesting to see. Obviously, I'm talking vampires, which aren't one of the core races, but maybe you know, your Tomb King army does have fast cavalry, so maybe you can deal with it. I don't know, but Tomb Kings could never march. Whether or not that's a rule, I don't know. I mean, they had My Will Be Done to move extra, which then kind of was like marching. But if they can't march, then maybe they don't use the march formation. Maybe they're going to be really easy to get rounds and get into the sides. But Tomb Kings are always a bit of a weird one because you had fast cavalry chariots and cavalry, and you know, so you had units that were fast. So we'll see, but some interesting things in there. I'm not a big fan of measuring the wheel during a charge. I just think it opens arguments, particularly as people could never wheel right. So we'll see if that works. Hopefully, if you watch this, you won't be one of those sideways slider wheel people. You know, playing blocks of dwarf warriors going 6 inches that suddenly move like effectively an impossible move because you could never actually move 5 inches forward and be at that angle in that place on the board because you've like slid you've done a handbrake turn, so hopefully we won't see that. I'm sure you will. But don't be one of those people. So, movement's interesting. I am looking forward to getting the actual rules in my hand and getting an in-depth look at this stuff and see if there are these little tricks of the trade that can be employed. I'm sure the rule set's going to be quite tight. But, in the old days, there was stuff like that and people just put up with that as part of the game. Even if it sometimes felt a little bit incorrect, but it was kind of how people played and it was kind of accepted. So we'll see how it pans out. But interesting things. Counter charge looks very interesting. So we'll see what that means. The marching order formation and the triple move, that's all new. So some new stuff in there. So it's quite interesting because I don't think they're in any version of the previous Warhammer. So although I think they said in another article they've kind of picked the best bits, they've obviously come up with their own stuff as well. Which is interesting because that might mean lots of changes for the combat phase, for how you strike. That we mentioned in the other phase there was a thing about pushback. So maybe that's a thing rather than breaking, but you're pushing. I don't know, but interesting article. I'm looking forward to the next one, the shooting phase. I'm not sure when that's up. When it's up, I'll do a video. You can check out my video on the strategy phase if you want to know more. I'm thinking about going back and looking at old editions and getting out my old books and talking about how armies used to play. As Carl messaged me and said, this would be a good idea for content if people can get into it. What armies, how do they play? What do they feel like? Obviously, that'll be based on what they used to do in 8th edition. That may not be what they do in Old World. So pinch of salt, but it might be an interesting thing to do to give people an idea of the history. I've got all the army books going back to 4th edition for every army, so I might dig those out of the loft and then do a few shows on that. If you're interested, let me know. If there's any faction you're particularly interested in, put in the comments below, and if it's not Tomb Kings, then you're wrong. But anyway, thanks very much for watching. I'll catch you all on the next one. As soon as there's another video, I'll do an update. Hopefully that was informative. Let me know what you think. If you don't want to miss out on Old World content from this channel, please click the subscribe button. Tell your friends, share it on your WhatsApp groups, whatever. I really appreciate it. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you all in the next one, and hopefully I'll be back with some more Old World content very shortly.